my name is Becky Baker and I am a teaching artist with Artists Creating Together, and I'm excited to join you for today's Stay Home, Stay Creative art lesson. Today we're going to be creating an abstract piece of artwork using painting and collage. And the process is pretty simple, but the product is really cool looking and would look really nice in a frame in your home. So let me show you an example of the piece that I created. So this is what we're going to be working on today. And I want to go over the supplies that we're going to need for this activity. So first you'll want some paper, and if you have it, some heavier, thicker paper would work best for painting on. So I've got some watercolor paper, or any other paper that you have at home would work fine too, but the heavier paper is best for painting. We've got our paper. We also will need some paints. So I'm going to be using some watercolor paints, or you could use tempera if you have tempera paint at home, or washable paints. We also could use drawing materials. If you don't have any paints, you could also do this step with just some drawing materials like crayons or markers or colored pencils. But we're going to do paint in the video today. And then other painting supplies that you'll need are a container of water, and a couple paper towels for dabbing our brushes off. You'll need a paintbrush, and a variety of different sizes is great. We're going to kind of experiment with making different kinds of paint marks, so whatever you have will work just fine. Another tool that I'm going to show you how to use for this project is a sponge brush. So I've got one of these. And you could find this at the dollar store or in craft sections in the grocery store. If you don't have a sponge brush, you can also make one of your own with some things that you can find at home. So here's an example of a homemade sponge brush. I just had a sponge that I cut a little piece off of, and then a clothespin, and there you go. So those are my painting tools. And then we'll also need some tools for the collage step. So we'll need some kind of drawing utensil. You could use a pencil or a marker. We'll need some scissors for cutting out our shapes, and then some kind of glue. So if you've got a glue stick or Elmer's glue will work as well. So those are all the supplies that we're going to need for this activity, and I think we're ready to get started. Okay, we are ready to begin painting. So I've got all of my painting supplies set out in front of me. I have my paper and paints, paper towel, paintbrush and sponge brushes, and my water container. And since I'm using watercolor paints, I went ahead and dipped my brush in the water, and then dripped some of that water, or dabbed some of that water onto each of my colors to get them wet and ready to paint with. And for this step, we are just going to have fun with painting and choosing whatever colors you would like to try, and whatever shapes and designs you want to do. And I'll show you a couple of different techniques that you can use with the different tools that we have. So for the first painting, and we're going to do a few paintings that we'll use to cut out for our collage. So the first painting I'm going to do is just going to be some different shapes with my paintbrush and some different lines. So we're not painting a picture of something for this project. We're just doing some shapes and lines and colors, because we're going to end up cutting up our paintings. So we're not going to do a picture of something, but just having fun with creating different patterns and shapes and lines. So I'm going to go ahead and put some color right on my paper here. Try out a few in between colors. If you're changing colors, you want to just rinse your brush off in the water. Maybe dab it on the paper towel. So I'm not doing a picture. with anything in particular, just creating some fun shapes of color. And something that could be really nice for the painting step is maybe putting some music on and painting along to the music. Be really relaxing. Maybe inspire you in your painting. So this is an example of just doing some abstract painting with our brush. Creating some lines, and we're going to cover the whole paper with color. So now I'm ready to move on to creating another painting, and I'm going to show you how you can use your sponge brush to create some fun patterns or designs. So I'm going to use the sponge brush here, and I'm going to go ahead and dip it in my paint. And for this particular technique, I'm just dipping the tip of the brush in the paint, so I've got paint all along the edge, and I'm going to make some lines, a line pattern. So I'm dabbing the tip of the brush onto the paper so it makes some lines. I'm going to get a little more paint. And you don't want your brush too filled with too much water, otherwise it'll make your paper pretty wet, but every now and then dipping it back in the paint. So I'm just making a repeated pattern here, covering up the whole paper, kind of experimenting with going different directions. So that is one technique you can use for making some patterns with your sponge brush. Another fun way we can use our sponge brush is making circles. So what you'll do is you'll dip your brush in the paint, get the paint along the tip or the edge, and we're gonna hold the handle and pressing down into the paper, you're gonna kind of spin your brush around and make a circle. So you're trying to kind of hold it steady so it stays on the paper there and spin it around at the same time. So you could make a whole bunch of circles on your paper, cover up the whole paper. Another fun thing that you could do while it's still wet is grab your brush, dip it into another color, get some water in your brush and dip it into another color, and then just dot some of that color onto the wet paint, and it kind of spreads out and blends with the paint that's already on there. That's a technique called wet on wet and can make some really cool designs too. Another fun way you can use your sponge brush is by scraping the color across the paper with the flat side. So again, we'll dip it in our paint, and for this step you don't want your sponge brush to be too wet, and we'll press it down and then scrape it across. And you can even kind of turn it, make some wavy lines, overlap. So that's another fun way that you can create some new designs on your paper. Once you are finished with your paintings, then you're going to set those aside to dry completely. And you can also speed up the drying process with a blow dryer if you have that at home. Otherwise, you'll just set it aside and then come back to it later once it's dry. And next we're going to take our paintings and we're going to actually flip them over. And for this step, we're going to draw some shapes on the back side of the paper, and these are just going to be some abstract shapes, so it doesn't have to be anything in particular. It doesn't have to look exactly like the shapes that I used in mine, but you can come up with your own fun shapes. They could be more geometric shapes like circles and squares and triangles, or squiggly shapes. So this part you can have fun with also. There's no right or wrong. So this is where we'll need your pencil or another drawing material. draw out some shapes on the back side. And so we're just going to draw shapes all over the paper. So that we can get as many shapes out of this piece as we can. Once you've got all of your shapes drawn on the back of your paintings, then you can go ahead and grab your scissors and cut those shapes out. And these are, again, abstract shapes, so if we don't follow exactly on the lines that you drew, that is okay. No one is going to know. And then once you've got all those pieces cut out, then we're ready to do our collage. For our final step, you're going to need a piece of plain white paper to glue all of your shapes onto. You also will need your glue, and we're going to go ahead and start laying out your shapes on your paper. So I would arrange the pieces on your paper, your white paper, first. And this step might involve some playing around with where they're going to be placed. You might try something here and then decide, oh, I'd rather move that piece over here. And I also would suggest leaving a little bit of space around the edge, around the border, so that you just have a little bit of room for framing it if you would like to put it in a frame once it's finished. So once you've got everything arranged how you would like it, then you're going to go ahead and start gluing them down piece by piece, trying to do it carefully so that we don't move the pieces around and keep them where you have it laid out where you would like it. So I'm going to use my glue stick to glue my pieces down. And with the glue stick or the Elmer's glue, when you glue it down, you'll want to just be sure to hold it there for a few seconds, just so that it's stuck down really well. And once we've got all of our pieces glued on, then our project is done. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you enjoy creating your own unique abstract work of art.